Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Sumpter Priddy, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Nice to be back here.
You're laughing because
more or less permanently.
you live in the center of the universe because you and I both agree that Ashland is the center of the universe.
Oh, no question in anybody's mind at all, you know.
Well, since you're an Ashlander, do you remember the history of where that came from?
Henry Clay's home in Kentucky.
Okay.
Named for that. And then the town of Ashland, when it was established in the 1850s, they renamed it for
Ashland.
For the good president.
That's
yep.
right. And then
or the good statesman.
Do you know where Center of the Universe came from?
That I don't know.
So I know that history because I was about a 10-year-old kid, lived next door to Mayor Dick Gillis, if you remember.
Sure,
Mayor
absolutely.
Gillis. Wore the big cowboy hat, really gregarious guy.
Piece of work.
Oh boy, was he! Well, he came up with the Center of the Universe.
Did he really?
Yeah, and it stuck, obviously.
I wasn't aware of that at all. So it's had that name for many decades.
Since the late 70s, I think.
Golly.
Yeah, I think he came up with it in the late 70s.
I don't think of it as being, well, it certainly wasn't floating around when I was here as a kid, and I left here in the mid 70s to
it wasn't a thing.
Yeah, wasn't a thing. But that's when it first shows up.
But now it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. You cannot avoid it.
And we're going to jump into why you and I are here and how we met. But I will tell you that I had a guy from New Jersey in here, a friend of mine.
Okay.
And he claimed he was from the center of the universe. I'm like, I'm sorry, man.
We got there first.
Yeah,
you are off.
You're trying to put a pink bow on a pig. Like, you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I got him straight, and he didn't fight me on it.
Good.
All right. So Sumpter, you and I met in your sister's store, Miss Timmie's.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We chatted outside.
Yeah, and Wayne Deal was there.
I
was
thinking maybe there was a time before that. So.
No, that was the day we met, and I didn't know the store was there, but I saw the big open flag, and I was happy to go in there. And then Wayne and I know each other. Wayne's a good friend of my dad's.
Gotcha.
But I'd never met you or Bruce.
Gotcha.
And so now we've met. I bought your book that day. One, because Wayne has helped me understand that I have a collecting problem. And maybe not. He wouldn't say problem. I'm the one using the word problem. And I also have a fascination with the color orange.
Good son.
This book.
So it's instinctive in you.
If I see orange, it usually catches my eye right away, and it's usually very appealing to me. And in this case, this book is gorgeous on the outside.
It was meant to stand out on the bookshelf too, as you might guess.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I bought the book. You and I chatted outside for a bit, and then I picked up my middle child, who's a student at Randolph-Macon. And she couldn't wait to go through it. So we sat awkwardly in my truck outside of her dorm. She's going through it. I said, you know who would enjoy this? Your grandmother. So we took it to my mom's place. She and my daughter were going through it, and they ran into a coverlet that I was telling you about.
Oh, that's right.
And my mom had the same coverlet. I mean, obviously not the exact same one, but the same pattern.
Less,
the same pattern.
Yeah.
So tell me everything. How did you get into this whole world of... I mean, what led you to American Fancy from the beginning kind of thing, what the path you were on?
The whole concept is something that, it's funny, was inspired by a family house down in Surrey County. It was a house called Snow Hill. And Snow Hill was built in 1836 by my third great-grandfather, Colonel Samuel Booth of the Surrey County Militia.
Okay.
And as it ends up, he was a builder. We weren't aware of it at the time, but we subsequently, in going through all of he was colonel of the county militia. He had, at the height of the 1830s economy, in 1836, he had 19 slaves. When 37 came and the bottom fell out, he was quickly down, I think, to 11 or 12. And I think he died with 8 or 9. His father was a Baptist preacher who had a little church really nearby, but Colonel Sam did well. He ended up building a 3,000-foot bridge over the Otterdam Swamp on Route 40 in Surrey County. So he was a builder by nature, and a cousin actually his first cousin, he built a house for on the road on the way to the ferry there at Scotland Wharf in Surrey. But the family were builders back then. I think it's probably very much in my blood. But that interior of that house had the wildest painted interiors. They'd never been touched since the day they'd been painted in 1836. And the baseboards in the house were grained to emulate marble.
He was ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time, and the paneling, it had wainscoting. The panels were bright, painted to emulate curl maple, and around it was mahoganized, and then the dado caps, basically the waist molding around the middle of the room, the chair rail, was green and blue. So this thing was popping. And the fireplace had a mantelpiece that reflected that same vocabulary, but twisted up and with 3 gilded sunbursts.
How old were you when you knew about this house?
We would go to this house, and my grandmother owned it.
Still in your family?
Well, it's not now. We owned it. We owned it up until my mom's death, and when she died in an auto accident back in the 80s. I had a chance to move there as which would have been wonderful as my inheritance. But I was at that point was a curator at Williamsburg, and it was just too far to conveniently. It was an hour and a half by the time you take the ferry every day, so it just didn't make sense. And I wasn't yet to the point that I could afford to buy my brothers and sisters out of their shares in the 200 acres.
Right.
So we ended up selling it to a fellow named Peter Post and his brother. Peter restores houses down there. They were going to restore it. That was why we sold it to him. To this day, they haven't done a damn thing. I gave him hell recently.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't done a thing.
How long ago did they buy it?
In the early 1980s.
And they haven't done anything?
Nothing. We gave him a great price because they were going to restore the house.
Wow.
So he's gotten a good finger wagging from me recently.
Yeah, I bet.
I can assure you. But in any event, it is still there. Thankfully, I've been back to the house in the last month, and I kind of check on it once a year because I've got an excuse to go through that part of the world. And
pretty part of the state.
You know what? It's a wonderful county. It's still pretty rural. It's amazing to me how little that road between Surrey Courthouse and Waverly has changed. And Waverly, one of those kind of forgotten little towns, and all the timberland nearby, and so a lot of it's held in trust by the Gray Timber Company. So that stuff certainly nowhere in the foreseeable future, I don't think, is going to be major subdivided and cut up. There's no huge draw, I don't think, down there right now.
Yeah, the house, your grandmother's house, and your 3 times great,
right? And my grandmother and her husband had lived in, and it was his grandparents had been raised in that house.
Gotcha.
And so they inherited, and then when he died in 55, Granny inherited it, and then it came to my mom and to us. And but when my mom died, I just couldn't afford to move down there in my life to restore a house, if that makes, and my socialization and I'd be stuck in the country. I didn't have enough money to do anything except. Well, I'd have had to work. It's just too large a commute. It's just complicated.
3 hours of traveling, and you're awake for maybe 16 or 17 hours a day. That's a lot.
Exactly. It didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So the house, but the house is thankfully still there. The last thing we did was paint it, put shutters on the exterior so that nobody could, and closed them so they were locked from the inside, so nobody could mess with the house, and put a tin roof on it, directly over top of the cypress shingle roof. Just to preserve what was there.
Right.
So it's still in kind of deep freeze, but
that's where wonderment probably started for you, being in that house.
That house had such a huge impact, you just can't believe it.
Yeah. So I'm looking at 3 binders here.
Yeah.
Well, I got one here you can't see that you brought in, and then we've got your book here. You've been through a ton of old, beautiful things.
Absolutely.
What is it about old, beautiful things that really appeals to you?
it isn't necessarily old. It isn't necessarily beautiful, but intriguing maybe.
Okay.
It's based on stuff that I haven't seen. I'm drawn to stuff that I don't understand, particularly from the past. I think people who have a disdain for the past are missing an incredible opportunity to find out about themselves. It teaches you. Every period in history has a completely different set of what I call an emotional vocabulary. And in that period, the emotional vocabulary focused on delight and exuberance, which is in the title of the book, on spontaneity. When you get to the Victorian, and about outward expressions, it was about walking into a room and saying, wow. And the whole, and it's all based on philosophical, 18th century philosophical things, that the more vivid the image, the more vivid the memory, and therefore the greater the impact on the mind, and the greater the filling of the mind took place by having these things that were influential. The Victorians in the next period.
Well, let's back up here for a second. Right. I have not said the title of the book. It's called American Fancy, and we obviously want to talk about where the title came from. And then the subtitle is Exuberance in the Arts, 1790 to 1840. Right. Then you as the author, Sumpter Priddy. So keep going. The period after this period.
So the period after that, then there was a terrible financial crash in 1837. It was the worst of the 19th century. People say that it was worse than 1929. And I mean, it was just devastating. It basically wiped things out for the better part of a decade. And all of these exuberant colors and this delightful gilded stuff and people celebrating stuff went, it just collapsed.
It got dark.
It got dark very quickly, and by the time you're to 1850, people would be painting. I won't say they were painting things black, but the vocabulary changes. Now the clothing got pretty ornamental, but it wasn't about ornament. It was about the splash of the color and the contrast. And the Victorians was a lot of fussy little detail, which was very different. To appreciate that stuff, you had to get right down on the things to look at the tiny little pattern. And with one of these early fancy rooms with gilded details, and you could tell all the details from 20 feet away, 30 feet away. So you automatically responded. And the Victorians, as ornamented as it was on the outside in its own distinct way, it took this kind of studied appreciation to absorb it and to see all the minute stuff. The other thing that happens is that iconographic stuff, particularly things that were inspired by or incorporated a religious sentiment. So emotions move inward, and things like there are pictures of children holding dogs, which were and of parents coddling infants. And but just very different sort of subject matter. It wasn't a single lady sitting there, brilliant decorative clothing. It moved to the inner emotional side,
subdued,
as a subdued, reserved, inward expression as opposed to outward expression. And so all of and when you move to modernism, all of a sudden in the late 19th century, things started moving inward in a different way, but reason starts to take place. We move back to a way to a worldview that's much more like the mid 18th century, that's classical and restrained, except it wasn't based on ancient Roman marble buildings that were reserved and dignified and based on perfect proportion. It was based on stripped down, practical, non-indulgent, but still beautiful. It was about pure geometry,
right?
And sometimes maybe incorporating a building with glass walls into the landscape that just caused you to back up, to appreciate things in a different sort of way
Right.
than the 18th century would have been. You wouldn't have walked into many of those rooms and said, "Wow!"
But you still want to take it in.
But you still want to take it in. Absolutely. Absolutely. It was just, but as I always say, every period has its different range of emotions. And you can look at a single object, not know anything about it, and say, what, and if it is something that is that the maker was sensitive enough to incorporate his view or the world view into it, you can tell within a 5 or 10, say a 10 or 15 or 20 year at most period when the devil it was made. You might not know a thing about it, you might not know where it's from, but the whole concept of style.
You would know.
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know.
It's a different vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
speaking Spanish or French or anything. It's a different vocabulary. It's an emotional vocabulary, and if you know how to read it,
Yeah.
not to hear it, but to read it,
Right.
then it's laden.
I like that idea of it being a vocabulary.
It is a
Yeah.
vocabulary.
And when did you start learning the vocabulary?
Learning this vocabulary?
Yeah.
You know what? You just teach yourself. It's something. This, and can I take a little aside
Sure.
about this book
Sure.
now? And I don't need to.
Okay.
Don't need to hold it. But this book actually, at the Winter Conference, in when would it have been? It wasn't a decade ago now. But in any event, Brock Jobe, a fellow who has been in charge of the program and is now about retirement age, but he's been in charge of the program for 30 or 35 years. Brock, Boston boy, went to the Winter program, did a Boston class, a Boston thesis when he was there, and so he was kind of the keynote for the 50th anniversary of the Winter program. And he said he decided that, and he talked with a lot of people, they decided that what he would do is to kind of, how would you sum up the impact of the program? He said, I decided that, he said that he decided that the best thing to do would be to survey 50 or 100 leading curators in America and ask each one of them to name what they considered the 3 most influential books in the field of American material culture. So,
And from the very beginning until
to
that year.
To that year. And of course, the largest majority of them were written by Winter graduates and curators, et cetera, et cetera.
You're saying when is that a name? Winter?
Winter. It's the graduate program that is run by the University of Delaware, and it's named for it's financed by the DuPont family, who founded, who made $1 bajillion making everything from explosives to, I think, probably Agent Orange or whatever.
Chemistry was kind
Chemistry,
of them.
yeah, chemistry and explosives were their things, and but Henry Francis DuPont, I think, was probably the wealthiest, one of the 2 or 3 wealthiest men in America, and the DuPont company, one of the absolutely most successful, I think, until Agent Orange. I think it was Agent Orange that did them in.
Yeah.
But in any event, they H.F. DuPont decided, and the family had so much money that through each generation they added another 20 rooms here and 20 rooms there and 20 rooms here, and next thing you know, it's 180 rooms or whatever.
Wow.
It's just huge, and H.F. DuPont, the last and the wealthiest of the DuPonts, at least the collecting DuPonts, built a collection, and the plan was to turn it into a museum. And in fact, he started this graduate program in American material culture to train American curators. So I had a degree there, and I got the job at Williamsburg after graduating, and finally I just saw the opportunities in the marketplace. But in any event, Brock Jobe, for this anniversary, 50th anniversary, went through all of the publications, and he basically went 1098765431 to say, he said, I figured out that the way is to judge the books that have impacted the field. So he asked the 30, 40, 50 leading curators in the field, And so he went to 987-654-321, and this was cited as the most influential book in the field of American material culture.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. I was incredibly proud, needless to say.
Yeah, of course.
Needless to say. And so it's required reading for a PhD at Harvard in American civilization.
Wow.
University of Pennsylvania. It's all over. And so that, needless to say, that, I mean, and everybody in the field was there for that 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And
it's like you were playing a sport, you won the game, and you were the hero of the game, and they put you up on their shoulders and took you off the field.
Yeah. And then it was a highest scoring game, in the 30 years of the gamesters.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Not only did you win the game, and you were the hero of the game, it was the best game in the last 30 years.
I can't tell you how much it cost me to do. I mean, it was this obsession to finish this book because I knew that
there's a lot in here.
A lot in that book, and it was as Brock Job says, we can't go quite so as far as to say it's a paradigm shift. He said, but it's the closest thing we have in this field to a paradigm shift. So
tell me where the title came from.
Basically, fancy is the name of the style, and it didn't mean decorated. It meant emotion laden. It strikes the imagination. It strikes the fancy. And the more colorful these things were, the better the storehouse of the memory. But that was the word they used, and they used the word fancy, and it's all American. It's such a distinctively American style. Nothing parallel to this that has this sort of acknowledged period analysis of what it was meant to do exists in any other culture on this same level.
Yeah, so if you think about North America and forget Central America for a second, just the big three countries there, there's a Mexican, Spanish lineage sort of thing. There's a Canadian,
which is
French,
very heavily religiously based often.
Right. And then you've got Canada that's French influence. And then you look at this country, and I have to remind myself, and maybe I'm wrong here, you tell me if I'm wrong, it's English and German here.
There's English and German. You go to Louisiana, there's French,
sure,
obviously. But certainly in this culture, English as in English, Scots, and Irish.
Right.
And it's important to know those little subtleties there, too.
British is what I should have said. Yeah.
British, for sure.
But it's uniquely American, everything that's in this.
Certainly the interpretation and the use of that word, there is nothing else, to my knowledge, just, and I won't say English, I'll say more Scottish, it's British.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Irish certainly embrace it, but ours is largely Scots Irish and English here.
Right.
And the pure Irish doesn't really have as large an impact until you get to the early 19th century.
Right.
Until the 1840s and 50s, and it just starts to really pick up there, that Irish immigration with the terrible famines in Ireland at that point.
Yeah, a lot of them ended up in Liverpool.
Yeah.
But the ones that they braved the Irish Sea to get to Liverpool, and then if they made it to this country, they were really brave because their Irish Sea experience, just being on the Irish Sea, it's usually pretty tumultuous on that body of water. All right.
You're well versed in history, clearly.
I'm a history major.
Culture.
But that was a long time ago. My kids ask me questions about history all the time, and I said, guys, I don't know all history.
Yeah.
And it depends
we all have our focus.
Right, that's right.
We all do.
Or I was just more breadth in my learning.
Right.
And so I know a little about a few things. But anyway, the idea of you being a museum curator. How old were you when you started doing that?
I went straight out of Winter to a postgraduate internship at Williamsburg.
Nice.
Worked with Wallace Gustler on the furniture of Williamsburg in Eastern Virginia, and then when that internship was over, a position opened up as teaching curator, which was I never imagined myself as being a teacher. I always imagined myself more being a student, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But it was a great way for me to have to do with another broader realm of material the same thing that I've kind of done with the fancy style. So a lot of this general approach then was used in educating both the all of the docents and tour guides at Colonial Williamsburg, and I did a lot of lecturing for conferences and that sort of thing, not just there but other places as well.
So I skipped past what I consider a major part of your story, which is where you went to undergrad, the finest university, maybe in the entire world.
I appreciate hearing that. I can tell you.
What was it like going there?
It was a great place, and I was very lucky. One to get in. I was at the top of my class at Patrick Henry. Ended up going to UVA. Was in a fraternity for 3 years and dropped out my last year because I was so focused on academic stuff and going off to graduate school.
And fraternities are kind of silly. And
at a certain level, 3 years was plenty in a fraternity. It was perfectly fine. But by the third year, I had about had enough.
Right.
And but in any event, I was president of the fraternity. I was president of the Society of Architectural Historians in the school. I had just short of I had like a 3.8, and I ended up.
I did not have a 3.8.
I ended up getting to live on the lawn.
Oh, you're one of them.
Oh, I'm one of those who was lucky enough to be. You kind of get points for everything that you do.
No, sure.
Yeah, if you're a president of this or president of that, or the GPA counted towards any event, and then you draw.
Hold on. For reference, I went to the same school. Forget the famous people that have come out of that school and that were on the lawn because they were big athletes or whatever they were. I literally only know 2 people.
Yeah.
In the 4 years that I went there, I have 2 acquaintances / friends that live there.
No, I was very lucky.
They're 48. They're 48, right?
Yeah.
There's 48 spots.
48 or 50, whatever there are.
Yeah, 48 or 50. Yeah.
So I feel incredibly lucky. Absolutely. And so then.
Did you like living on the lawn?
It was fabulous. And
it was high traffic outside your door.
It was high traffic, but you know what? The high traffic was generally very. It was obviously confined to certain points of the day.
Right.
When you lived there, the rooms had sinks in them and fireplaces. There was no toilet or shower in the room. So in order to take your daily morning shower, whenever you did, you had to walk. Basically 100 yards, not 100 yards, but 50 yards down. Well, if you go into the shower, you don't go to the shower dressed in your clothes. You go in your bathrobe,
right?
And with a towel over your shoulder. And if it's dead of winter, you have some vaguely warm bedroom slippers on, and you go down halfway down the lawn, and then down the steps to underneath the rooms on the lawn.
Oh, they were underneath the rooms.
Well, weren't underneath the rooms. There was a sink in the room, but the toilets were only, there was one on each side.
Wow.
Not one toilet, but there are 3 or 4 of them along with the shower. It was a magical place to live. And when you think of the people who've lived there through the years, and it's a magical place. And it's the only place I know in English-speaking North America, that area confined by the lawn, which was open on one end. They built in
Cabell Hall
on the end, back at the turn of the early 20th century. I may even been the 1890s, but anyway, by the time it was all enclosed, it might have been 1920. But that is the one place on this earth, man-made place on this earth that I know of, other than if you've ever been to Oxford.
I have not.
Or Cambridge, where all of these little ancient rooms and this totally confined, what they call colleges. You can walk back into a much smaller space, and then through another arch into another smaller space where it's been unchanged since literally the 16th century.
Wild.
And but that's the only other place I've ever been, man-made place on earth that one imagines there will remain the same I don't
I
want
hope
to say
so.
into eternity. God knows if we don't destroy ourselves in the interim. But it was just a magical place to be.
Yeah, so I want to get a picture of this, and anybody that has any familiarity with the lawn and the rotunda.
Right.
If you're standing with your back to Cabell Hall, but you're in front of Cabell Hall, but
Yeah.
you're facing the rotunda.
Right.
Were you left or right?
I'm on the right side, right next to the rotunda.
Okay. Lots of traffic.
You know what? Yes, but it was respectful.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
It's not like there were people. The loudest stuff to go on the lawn was basically Friday, Saturday.
Sure.
It's nights, people partying out in front of their rooms, and people. I think there's a sort of hushed reverence when people walk in there.
I never saw anybody misbehave.
Yeah,
On the lawn.
the public certainly. Some of the students occasionally do, but the public is very respectful.
Yeah, I wasn't hanging out at the lawn. I was just going back and forth to class. Yeah.
Right.
And I occasionally maybe throw a frisbee on the lawn, that kind of thing.
Right.
But,
But you wanted to walk through it.
absolutely.
Yeah, you didn't want to walk around it.
What a stunning 360 experience.
No joke.
It's
No
crazy.
joke.
It's absolutely
Yeah,
crazy.
it's magical.
Yes, it is. All right, so let's go back to the museum
Okay.
time. You're a teaching curator.
Right.
You'd rather be a learning curator, I imagine.
You know what? You know what? But teaching forces you to learn, and so in some respects, it was a very good transition, and it was a very good transition for me, particularly because I do so much writing. So it forces you. Being smart is one thing, or aspiring to be smart is one thing, but actually learning how to present stuff in a way that is concise and that the public can digest, and recognizing what's important to put on paper and what is not, or what to relegate to footnotes, or what to suggest for further research that needs further research that the whole experience opens up for me as the author.
Right.
But isn't the path I'm meant to go down. Maybe it is for you, the reader.
Right.
All of those sorts of things.
Okay. So you spent 4 years in Charlottesville, which was I had a wonderful
magical,
experience
yeah,
there.
absolutely.
But now you're in Williamsburg, which is kind of the first incorporated place in this country, or at least, certainly in what is now the United States of America. That had to be great
That was a
to work
wonderful
there.
experience. Absolutely.
And what was the museum actually curating?
I went there as an intern to work with Wallace Gusler on the furniture of Williamsburg in Eastern Virginia. So I actually did the introduction for that. He was very nice to let me do that, basically. And then a position opened up for me as teaching curator. And with that, I had an opportunity to move into the historic area. So I lived in a tiny little building called the Sign of the Rhinoceros. I don't know if I just said this or not. Anyway, but it's been at the back of my mind. It's one of those things to come up. But the Sign of the Rhinoceros was an apothecary shop in the 18th century, and rhino horn was supposedly an aphrodisiac.
What did you do?
We're
Just
not
touch
going to
it?
go down that.
I don't-
But anyway, it was never open to the public. It was just
like private collector.
it was
sort of-
actually it was one of those small outbuildings that was on a alley, and it wasn't big enough to hold the public, but it was a reconstructed building,
I got you.
and so it was one of those that was leased out to employees of the. If you've been there so long, you had an opportunity to get into the historic area, and the curators they weren't all curators by any means who lived in the building. There were a number of other employees, but being a curator, it got me a little bit of a pull that when that opened up. So I ended up living in the Sign of the Rhino for 4 or 5 years.
Oh wow.
And it was just magical, walk to work, and it was just a great town, a great experience.
Similar structure to the lawn. You living on the lawn.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yep. One long avenue, basically,
Yeah.
and history, and that's what I do. That's my thing.
So you were in the museum for 10 years. Did you Go to
just 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, between Winterthur and Williamsburg,
right.
a
Okay.
long 10 years, 11 years maybe. But
And then what got you out of museums?
you know what? I had found a painting on a trip to New England that had just a wonderful little picture of an Indian lady seated beside a small little stream with a little waterfall with a baby and a papoose seated right next to her. And it had like 13 holes in it. It was maybe 18 inches by 24 inches. It wasn't particularly long, but it was one of those things that was clearly done in the period, clearly done in a real context. This is not somebody sitting there fantasizing with an Indian. It was detailed. So I had that hanging on my wall, and it's one of my biggest hits in this field have been. I've had some really good furniture hits, but most of my really big hits have been paintings. And
you essentially became an antique dealer.
I became an antique dealer.
Yeah.
And so eventually there was a fellow there, fellow by the name of Rick Guthrie, who's a blacksmith, wonderful guy, and he's no longer with us. He's moved on. He's passed on, but he was a blacksmith, but he was incredibly. I think probably was somewhat dyslexic, but he was brilliant, and he was really interested in Native Americans. So he dated Barbara Luck.
Okay.
The Lucks here in Ashland.
I know the name.
Yeah. And Lux Dairy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And her brother is still around, is still very much around Ashland. In any event, Rick Guthrie came by, and Barbara came by the house one day, and he looked up on the wall and he said, "Is that a real Paul Kane?" I said, "Keep talking, buddy boy." so
because you're a businessman too.
I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was, and it's Canadian, and it's Paul Kane. This painter kept a journal. We know exactly when he painted.
Oh, so the provenance is awesome.
Provenance is awesome, and he did 2 or 3 versions of it, but they were all basically identical. And the perfect mate to it was in the Royal Ontario Museum. So I sent it off to Canada to be sold, and about $45,000, which back in the 1970s was a whole lot more money than it is today.
It's a lot of money today, but it's a whole lot more back then.
Yeah. So I took that made the year's leave of absence to finish the fancy book a whole lot more realistic to do.
You did this in a year?
You know what? That book got written. The vast majority of it got written that year, but it took a long decade to get it.
Yeah.
It wasn't published till 2000. But it was, it was a labor of love, just because, and a lot of people didn't understand it, but I knew it had to be done, and it ends up being, just one of the cornerstones of American material culture studies. Yeah. And now I'm not sure where I'm going with all of
No, it's all good. So this idea of going up to New England, because you went to New England a lot.
I went back then. The other thing is, and this did I say this? Historic Deerfield, when I went up for the summer fellowship program as an undergraduate, had more Southern furniture in their collection, unidentified, than Williamsburg did in their collection, exhibited.
That's
mind blowing.
It's mind blowing when you hear it at first,
Yeah.
and then you start to think about it, and you figured out that maybe around 1861 to 1865, some things traveled north.
It's really intriguing, and some of the stuff traveled north, or some of it was Yankees coming south, and one of the many people, there was a dealer by the name of, and there were certainly Southerners who have northern ties.
Right.
Occasionally went north with Southerners, but Joe Kindig, one of the great dealers out of Pennsylvania, Joe Kindig Jr., would come down. They were among the first antiques dealers to have not be going around in buggies, but in high quality cars and trucks. And the Kindigs made what did they breed? They bred horses for the Union Army during the Civil War, and made $1 bajillion. They were leading horse breeders for the Union Army, and so they always had money, and they were always interested in history, and they always collected because they had the funds.
Because they have the same part of their being that you and I have.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they, the Kindigs, Joe Sr. would end up back once automobiles came in. He was the Kindigs would laugh to say, he's the first person in York to have a car and the last person to tell you it was better than the horse. So they were breeding horses and mules. But anyway, he would take the ferry down, I think, from Pennsylvania to Norfolk.
Okay.
Or come down to Maryland and take the ferry down to Norfolk, and then come back up through Southeast Virginia, going to all the antique shops and taking loads of things back up north.
And then they didn't know what they had.
Well, you know what the thing is, they were incredibly smart about the material. And early in my career, Jennifer Kindig, I think she's a little bit younger than I am. I think they're now long since out of the business because you just can't compete these days unless you've got a very clear niche and it's pretty small in the whole deal. But they're certainly very much involved in the field in abstract sort of way, and they're out there. But in any event, I bought several good Southern things from them that were still in the collection way back when. But it was that summer experience up in Deerfield, so literally every year since then, at least once and sometimes a couple of times, or even 3 or 4 times, I've got good contacts in New England who'll find things. They'll call me. We'll usually partner on them. But I'm up there for all the shows, and I just keep finding great stuff.
But the Yankees can't appraise that stuff like
you know
can.
What they don't have the market for it, and they don't and it doesn't matter how many books you publish. You can never cover all of the breadth of the Southern stuff. So for the dealers up there, even if they knew what it was, they wouldn't have the clients to sell it. So they call me. We usually partner 50-50.
Yeah.
I pay them. What did it cost you? It cost you $500. I'll buy my half I'll buy half interest for $250 or whatever it is.
Right.
It might be a $10,000 object we sell for $40 or $50, but whatever it is. And it's worked well through the years, or at least even in slow years, it's worked well enough.
Right. So you told me the story, and I've got it right here in one of your binders. The painting that it's called Pepper Pot, a scene in the Philadelphia market, painted in 1811.
Yep.
How did you know it was about to be auctioned?
You know what, John Lewis Krimmel, because of there were some of his works there at Winterthur, and I opened. If you subscribe to catalogs from auction companies, and back before everything was on the internet, you get these little catalogs, and I get a catalog on a Thursday night when I'm heading to New York, and there on the last page, it's on the third-rate stuff on a Saturday morning sale at Neal Auctions in New Orleans.
No one knew what they had.
No one knew what it was, and it was identified at the back as Soup Kitchen Parody.
Parody.
Yeah, that's how Neal's defined it, and it was at the back. It was 90% in this little Saturday morning, or maybe it was in a Friday morning auction before all the good stuff would come up on Saturday and Sunday. And that painting, that didn't have any holes, a couple of little holes, nothing of consequence. But I looked at it, and because I had the Krimmel book and knew the Krimmel's work from Winterthur, but I looked at it and said, good God Almighty! So
How big was it?
It was an inch and a half by an inch, basically. Let's say at most 2 inches high by an inch and a quarter.
Okay.
Tiny. There were 10 or 15 pictures on the back page.
And you really have to know what you're looking at.
You have to know what you're looking at. But there was a painting at Winterthur where one of the figures was very similar to the figure in this painting. And I looked at it and said, that's a criminal. Well, it's Thursday night. I'm going up to New York City. Actually, I see this thing just as I'm walking out the door to drive to New York for the I think it's October sales, November sales, and October sales in New York. And so I call Ralph Harvard's wife, Clifford Dunlap. I don't know if you know her, but Clifford works for Lee Keno. And Ralph Harvard and I were at UVA together in architectural history, and he's a designer in New York. And his wife Clifford is just a great lady, and they've been great friends to me through the years. Anyway, so I call her and say, "Can you? I'm heading." I said, "I've got to get to New Orleans by Saturday after whatever it was Saturday. It might have been the dregs on a Sunday mornings." So I said, "I'm going to be in New York. Can you? Here's my charge card number. Can you make reservations for me? Find out what's available the first thing on Saturday to get me to New Orleans. I need to be at an auction for Sunday morning, the dregs of them." So she makes me the reservation. I get to New York, spend the night in the hotel, get up early the next day, and fly to New Orleans.
You knew you had a criminal, but I don't think you knew. Did you know how powerful of a criminal?
You know what? I just knew it was good, and I knew that it was missing because it was listed in the book, known to have been painted but not seen. Then there was no question in my mind, and it actually
so the community that appreciates that painting the most didn't know where it was.
Didn't have a clue. And it's not like he painted 10 of them. Some artists will have a painting that's very successful. They paint 10 to 15 of them. But it's this black lady selling, a Caribbean lady selling pepper pot soup, which is a Caribbean specialty, in the Philadelphia marketplace, which is where she had ended up, and which is where Krimmel was. And this painting hadn't been seen since it was discussed in the first history of American art as the first American genre scene. So I ended up getting into the Airport Hilton.
Did you know that before you bid? Okay.
Yep.
You knew all that cold bid.
I knew the whole deal because I had the book.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I end up being it's funny because it was in this junky little Sunday morning sale, Sunday morning sale, and so the painting comes up at auction, and it's like, oh God, I could barely sit there and say how many other people, and the room was relatively sparse because it was the lesser stuff because they had some of these holes in it. It was filth and it was unframed, etc. So the auctioneer says, "All right, ladies and gentlemen," he says, "we've had a whole lot of interest in this."
And you're like, "Oh no!"
He said, "We've had a whole lot of interest in this painting," and he says, "I've got a number of left bids here." It's like, "Oh God, no! Don't tell me this." He said, "I'm going to start right here. I've got $100, $125, $150, $175." Anyway,
what year was this?
This would have been in mid 80s.
Okay.
Mid 80s.
The world was different in the mid 80s.
The world was very different then.
Yeah.
And there was no internet sale, none of that stuff.
No cell phones.
None of that stuff.
Yeah.
So any event, I bought the picture for $1,100 plus 10% buyer's premium, $1,210. Like, thank you, Jesus. Tiny enough that I didn't need to check it at the airport. They don't want you taking the big painting, so I wrapped it in my coat and put it in the overhead, and just slept because I hadn't slept for like 3 or 4 days for the anxiety of seeing this, this thing coming up and getting where I needed to be.
It's probably the best discovery that you've had.
My single best discovery. I've had some awfully good discoveries, and they they keep coming up. But in any event, and then ended up going to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, one of H.F. DuPont's granddaughters.
Tell me more about going up to New England and just discovering things. You're like, oh my, you know exactly what it is, or you have a really good idea.
Yep. The it's the internet helps some, but basically the thing that really helps the most is knowing materials. It's amazing to me how many curators, even furniture curators, don't understand all the subtleties of wood.
Really?
Yeah, and one of the really important things, and I was actually writing somebody in the last 48 hours about in fact, there's some differences of opinion on some furniture out there on the market right now, and there are some of everybody thinks of the Yankees anyway think of cultures flowing from the north to the south, but,
right?
A couple of the biggest cabinet making families in Rhode Island. I mean, not the Goddards and the Townsends, but there were a couple of others. Start out in Virginia and go north, and their furniture that was being made in Virginia and being made basically in the Norfolk School and being made in the Newport School or very nearby is almost identical, except that the southern stuff got southern wood in it, the northern stuff's got Yankee wood in it. So I've handled a half dozen or so pieces of that furniture, and it's just all these little subtleties. All culture does not go from north to south, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
The world's a very complex place, and the wind blows 4 different directions, thank you, sir.
Yes.
So, and it also ends up in the Midwest. A lot of it ends up. It doesn't just end up in Ohio, down in New Orleans. It ends up in Ohio. Huge migration of Virginians to Ohio, and in St. Louis, when there's a great dealer out there, a fellow by the name of Robert Morrissey, who deals in English stuff, but he'd seen my ads through the years. And he's just a prince of a guy. I mean, just a wonderful fellow. And he and his wife are just sweethearts. But anyway, he started calling me with all of this. He'd seen my ads, so he would find all this great Southern furniture in St. Louis.
And he knew it was Southern furniture.
And he knew it was Southern. He's a smart guy, but he had no interest. He didn't have a market for it out there. And so he would sell me half interest for whatever he bought it for. And I'd bring it back and sell it, and we'd split the profit. And as it ends up, the reason it ended up out there is with the opening of the West, Virginians had due west. They crossed the Mississippi at St. Louis.
Right.
That's the standard route if you're in the central in our part of the South.
That's why that big arch is there.
That's why that big arch is there.
Yeah.
So in any event, it showed up out there, and so he's found a lot of stuff for me out there through the years, and it's been great fun doing that as well.
What collection have you encountered that intrigued you the greatest?
You know what? That's a hard one. There's some of those old family collections that had managed to stay together until the 1950s and 60s and 70s. The folks at Blandfield. There was some of that early material, but it's amazing to me how most of the stuff has been widely scattered, to the four winds through the generations.
Yeah.
And
because not everybody has that thing in them where they want. Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
And the family's got 4 or 5 kids. The furniture gets divided up. Maybe somebody stays at the original house, but usually they'll, at some point the house gets sold, and it's understanding and it's funny. I'm dyslexic. I read very slowly, but I've got a great visual memory.
You got a 3.8 at UVA. And you're dyslexic.
I really am.
No, I believe you.
But it's being in my field with architectural history and stuff. I was in my bailiwick.
You wrote a book.
Yeah.
A very significant book in many ways.
Yeah.
And you're dyslexic.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
You had to work harder.
You know what? I write very slowly.
Wow.
But I, to be a slow reader doesn't mean a lot of dyslexic people are far more perceptive. They have other skills of processing, and it is amazing what a lot of us can do.
So the written word and when you're writing and reading, it's slow.
But the visual, it doesn't affect visual memory. In fact, if anything, we compensate in that context. And so I'm lucky that and I almost always, and sometimes maybe I have to sleep on it for a week or a month or 6 weeks even before wake up in the middle of the night. Got it.
Yeah.
But can't tell you how many pictures I've got in my total files. Certainly 10 to 15,000, which is a lot to be sorting through and trying to figure out. But I know my southern stuff inside and out. I know most of the northeastern stuff well enough to know who will buy it if it's. But that market's so imploded through the years.
Yeah. What style of furniture really gets your juices flowing?
You know what? It's not so much as anyone. I like early stuff. I'm really not interested in the Victorian era. I mean, anything up until that. Most of the classical stuff is pretty dull to me. And it starts to be produced in larger factory environments at that point, so it loses its individuality. But the earlier stuff that's shop-oriented or family-oriented, if that makes sense. There's every shop and every family who were in the trades, and they're usually family. It's not like somebody goes off and decides they're going to be a cabinet maker. It's intergenerational.
Right.
They develop their own style. You can recognize the style. The woods. If they move across the landscape. If their furniture's got this wood in it, was made when they were in Virginia. If it's got that wood in it, is made when they were in Missouri or wherever it is that they ended up going.
You've traveled all over the world doing this.
Certainly all over the States.
Nothing in Europe?
What have I ever gotten? There were a couple of British dealers who I've done a little bit of business with, but it's been years since I pulled anything out of Britain. It used to be fun to go. And there was a while I probably would go every 3 or 4 years, but it's just not worth it. My market is basically raping and pillaging Yankees to get back to bring stuff back south that they raped and pillaged the South. And take out of here.
Right. The idea of doing this is something you're going to do the rest of your life, right?
Thank you, Jesus. What else the hell am I going to pick up at this point? That and I've got these book projects I've got to get done. So this next year it's to finish the Jefferson Trist story.
What's that?
Thomas Jefferson had a girlfriend that was not Sally Hemings, and it's a lady by the name of Elizabeth Trist. And Elizabeth Trist, I've owned a number of Jefferson pieces. I think I mentioned earlier.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson. Just after his wife had died, he went north to go to the Continental Congress in the 1780s. And his wife had just died. His young daughter, was with him. And he stays at the house of, what's her mother's name? Mary House. And it's the best. It's the nicest kind of small inn in Philadelphia, only 2 blocks from Independence Hall.
Okay.
And all the Virginians stayed there. Madison, Monroe, Jefferson, they all stayed there because it was very, very friendly. Mrs. Trist actually had, her maiden name was House. And her mother was Mary House, and her grandfather was Peter Stretch, the greatest of the Philadelphia clockmakers.
Okay.
So Jefferson stays there, and Mrs. Trist has a husband, but who's lost on she'd married was a member of the British military who was stationed in Philadelphia and abandoned during the Revolution, and abandoned ship because he fell in love with this lady where he had roomed during the Revolution. And Miss House Trist, her husband was lost in military in the Deep South. She had cousins down in Virginia who lived in Charlottesville and were friends of Jefferson. So that was a connection, one of the several connections that brought all the Virginians to stay there. And Mrs. Trist, her mother Mary House, and her grandfather Peter Stretch, who was in the adjacent building, the greatest clockmaker there. Jefferson's grandparents were the best cabinet-making builders in Virginia.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep, the Randolphs and the Careys. And there's the first story of Jefferson as a architect was with him. And the earliest drawing to survive, is his plan for an addition to the governor's palace in Williamsburg, which he did when he was a student at William and Mary. What they don't tell you is that his grandfather, Henry Carey, was building the College of William and Mary, and Henry Carey II was doing an addition to the Capitol in Williamsburg. And to the governor's palace in Williamsburg, adding an extra room on there. So here you have Jefferson, he's not just an architect and a builder because he took it up. He did it because it's on both sides of his family.
Right.
Richard Randolph of Tuckahoe, who built Tuckahoe, was his grandfather. Jefferson lived as a kid, spent a lot of time at Tuckahoe.
Is that building still there?
That family, and descendants were there until recently. It may have now been sold, but in any event, now where was I going with all this? Oh, but the bottom line is, Jefferson stays there because there are family. She's got family ties to Virginia. He knows about all of that, her reputation and the family ties. And in fact, her cousin was a friend of Jefferson, but Jefferson hadn't met her. Her husband was gone. She had a son. Jefferson, her husband's lost on the frontier. Jefferson's just lost his wife and's got a daughter. Well, they get together. They both come from the finest artisan families in Philadelphia and Virginia, respectively. They are like, it was a match made in heaven. The next thing you know, Jefferson's in the presidency, but the minute Jefferson's out of the presidency, she moves to Virginia, and she lives in Charlottesville. He designs an addition for propriety's sake. She can't just immediately move, and also because of this the circumstances of rooming at Monticello. She can't move into Monticello immediately, so she goes to Farmington, where her cousin lives. Jefferson puts an addition. We've just figured out this addition that was done to Farmington was done because she came down to Virginia to live at her cousin's house, but there wasn't room in the house for her. So Jefferson designs. It's the only building he ever designed an addition for. Jefferson didn't do additions, but he did one for Mrs. He
went big.
He went big, and but for Mrs. Trist's cousin at Farmington, he made an addition so that Mrs. Trist would have a place to stay. Once he was out of the presidency and back in Charlottesville full time, she ends up getting a room she has a room at Monticello. She sometimes stayed in Charlottesville, but she basically lived at Monticello. She dies at Monticello. She is buried at Monticello in the family graveyard.
Did she outlive him?
She outlived him by a couple of years. Yep.
Yeah, because he famously passed away July 4th of
26.
Yeah,
50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something else. And anyway, she's there as long as anybody is. But the whole thought that everybody says, oh, well, Jefferson was having this relationship with Sally Hemings, and he was doing this, and he was doing that, and he was doing the other. There's no way on God's green earth Sally Hemings was going to be sneaking into his bedroom in Monticello, his bedroom that had 8 huge windows or 6 huge windows from the floor to the ceiling. It was private on the back side of the house, but it's absurd. Mrs. Trist living in the house. There was always 3 or 4 other family members living in the house there with him. What do you mean he's sneaking a little bit with Sally Hemings on the side? What's he doing? Going down to the slave cabins? It's just absurd. Yeah. And he had this relationship. It was basically a 15 to 20 year relationship with Mrs. Trist. The people at Monticello, and I haven't checked this recently, but when I last checked it 3 or 4 years ago, they talk about Sally Hemings being buried at Monticello and Johnny Hemings being buried at Monticello, and they lived out their years there. That's not true. When Jefferson died, they moved into Charlottesville. They had a room over top of a market on 5th Street in Charlottesville. They lived there. They died there, and when they died, they were brought back and they were buried at Monticello in the slave graveyard.
Right.
But in the event,
so the Hemings story is completely manufactured.
It was manufactured by his political enemies.
Yeah.
Yep, completely manufactured, and
so it goes back to then. Like people were talking about it back then.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Talking about Mrs. Trist or talking about Sally Hemings?
Sally Hemings.
Oh, people. It was all done by his political detractors. He had a nephew by the name of Thomas Jefferson, his brother's son, and he is acknowledged, and in a number of circumstances, it's very clear he is the Thomas Jefferson who got Sally Hemings pregnant, and his political detractors. Jefferson, what do you mean Jefferson's going down and having a relationship with him?
Yeah.
And she was, and I will say that she was 9/10 white. In the when you check the Virginia censuses, which list race and age, etc., she lives into the early 1830s. You check the 1820 and the 1830 census. In the 1830 census, when she and John Hemings are living on 5th Street in Charlottesville over top of a store, they're both listed as white.
By law, that's worked, yeah.
Yeah, well, because they looked white. Mm. They were basically.
And I guess you couldn't figure out their lineage easily.
Some guy comes along. Wouldn't know them, looks at them, they're 9/10 white.
Right.
Because of the intermarriage through the years with whites, and that didn't happen through one generation. That happens through multiple generations.
Sure. Yeah, that's a wild story. I should have paid more attention, I guess, but I just assumed it was political silliness. But I thought it came up after he passed away. But you're telling me.
No, his political detractors used it in the period.
So politics have been brutal for
forever.
They
have been yeah. There's nothing new about nastiness in politics.
No.
As they say, the alternative to war.
Sure.
Politics is the alternative to war.
Yeah, get as nasty as you need.
We don't need to kill anybody, but anything else is
fair game.
Fair game.
It's because it's short of war, actual war. Yeah,
absolutely.
So what do you got going on these days?
Well, getting this
besides the book.
You know what? I bought a wonderful thing last summer in New England that I'm finally finish up here shortly. I've had a slew of nice sales here in the last month or so. It's funny. It's as I said, you can't earn a living, but every now and then you make a killing. And sometimes it's with one big hit, and sometimes it's with just all of a sudden the clients pop out of the woodwork, and who knows why or what happens. Anyway, I've had a good little run of business, and I've got 3 or 4 more objects that I've just sold. And which is all good, and they're all wonderful Southern things to clients who I've dealt with for years.
Yeah.
So, and they keep showing up, and they've been very supportive, and they like what I do, and they're successful. Some of them, I've got 2 or 3 that are just really, really very loyal long-term clients.
And you're saying clients, I would think of them as collectors.
They're collectors,
and
yeah.
they
Homes full of wonderful things,
and they know what they like.
Yep.
And so
Absolutely.
when they hear about something out there and they
Right.
know it might be a competitive marketplace for
Yep.
that item, they're willing to spend real
Spend
money. Yeah.
And so everything I've sold, virtually all of it is Southern stuff, with one exception. I was out at an auction in, and I'm not going to tell all the specifics, but in the Midwest, because there was a dealer out there who had a really, truly great Virginia Queen Anne chair, and he'd watched my ads through the years. So I went out to the Midwest, up to Ohio, to pick this thing up, and we previewed an Ohio auction out there, and there was a tea caddy that was listed as, and I'll show you a picture here shortly, a tea caddy with listed as European. And if you look at it and you didn't know woods, that would be just fine. But I'll pick up this tea caddy, and it is literally a medieval tea caddy. I mean, it is the earliest friggin' tea caddy out there you have ever seen. It is a medieval sarcophagus form tea caddy, and I'll show you a picture on my phone in
When we stop
when
recording, yeah.
we stop. And this tea caddy, in the 17th century, as classical things were really starting, Roman-inspired things were starting to come in. You know, the medieval, the Gothic was moving on, and the restrained classical things are coming in. One of the early forms for boxes or for burials there were sarcophagus. There were big burial caskets, but they started making them in small boxes. And when tea comes in, the sarcophagus, because tea was very expensive, they started making these sarcophagus form boxes that were just they're totally distinctive. There are no colonial American examples that have been known to exist. But I'm looking at this box, which is the most exquisite veneer you've ever seen, is in pretty amazing shape for a 17th century object. And flip it over, and it's poplar on the bottom, and you look on the inside, and it's either yellow pine or it's a red pine, and you can't always tell visually. But there was no mistake that this thing was an American sarcophagus form, medieval, like dating certainly no later than 1700 and potentially 1650. Well, tea wasn't introduced to America until 1654, and it was introduced by a Dutchman named Peter Stuyvesant, who was the Director General of the Dutch West India Company and the first Governor General of New Netherland, which becomes New York.
Right.
Until it's defeated by the English in 1670, whatever it is, and it becomes New York. But and Peter Stuyvesant stays there. But Peter Stuyvesant starts his life. He first introduces tea to New York in 1644, I think it is. Maybe he's known to have been there about 39, but there's first the documentation of him with tea is 1644. Within a year or two of that, his other in addition to importing tea, his other mainstream business venture is to go to South America to buy to harvest with a ship and a crew to harvest Brazilian rosewood, which is one of these exotic woods that was before mahogany really comes in, that they, particularly the Continentals, love to use for cross-banding on furniture. And so he goes down to Brazil. It's well documented when he's there. He brings back a huge load of this stuff to New York Some of it, I'm sure, ends up back in Europe with this larger Dutch marketing. But this tea caddy that I have, which is the earliest in a continental form, has none other than Dalbergia resinosa, the black Brazilian crossbanding all over it. There's no other earlier piece in American furniture.
So you knew what you were looking at.
Yeah, I knew
exactly
what I was looking at right there. It's an incredible object, and when you look at it, you say that's pretty medieval.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful.
I was going to say also
object.
beautiful, based on your description.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And any event.
Yeah, that's fun. Do you find yourself just going into antique stores randomly?
I go in all the time. They're just kind of furniture shops, used furniture shops, antiques and stuff. And anyway, kind of once a month I pull something that's, 3 weeks ago I pulled a really nice pair of New York 1750s Queen Anne's side chairs with pad feet and shell carved knees and a nice surface and the original slip seats.
Just in a antique store somewhere.
In a basically a used furniture, a trash and treasure sort of place.
Well, very cool. Well, I appreciate you doing this.
My
Sumpter.
pleasure. I appreciate your enduring my
your
my yammering.
No, your passion for this is
it's
remarkable.
It's fun stuff.
Yeah.
Every day's a treasure hunt.
Yeah, I can learn a few things from you. I just did.
And then I go and hide and write it up, which is, writing is isolation and it's heavy focus and.
But you don't mind that either.
No, I don't. I'm somewhat dyslexic, but I'm great with the object. It's a visual memory, so it takes me longer to write it up than I'd like.
Yeah.
But it's part of the fun, and it is amazing what comes out, what linkage to other artisans or other pieces or what you never expect to see.
And you love discovering those.
Oh my God! Well, it's money. There's dollars and cents in it, and sometimes you miscalculate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you come out ahead enough of the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate your enduring it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.